the course of 3 Amphibia seasons, there have been many situations that had us on the edge of our seats, believing something terrible has happened, or wondering what things would be like if another horrible thing had not occurred. Would the show's ending be even happier, or a complete nightmare? What if Darcy had killed Anne? For your information, the situation is as follows. We are currently in the episode The Beginning of the End, when Anne, the Plantars, Sasha and the rebels kicked off the assault on Utopia. Their plan to secretly infiltrate the castle fails, as they are welcomed by Darcy. In order to finally obtain the entire power of the Calamity Gems, Darcy intends to kill Anne, believing the power will surely return to the box. Where on the OT, Anne managed to convince Darcy to wait and reconsider. On the timelines we will be discussing now, Anne cannot change Darcy's mind and is killed. From this point on, there are 4 possible ways the show could come to an end. Given we do not know for certain what happens to the Calamity powers when Anne dies, while she is still carrying a part of the blue gem power, we'll just have to consider all of the likeliest alternatives. Here we go. The absolute worst case scenario. Darcy rejoices as the powers simply stream out of Anne's lifeless body back into the Calamity box. They now have total control over the entirety of the gem powers, meaning that there is no one left who can still oppose them. Not to mention that they have already called the top rebel executives and just need to chop off their heads too. They might put up a fight, they might not. Considering the heart of the operation, the person who kept everything together was just murdered in front of their eyes. One way or another, I do not believe there is any escaping the core, Andreas or the Frobos. Yep, that's pretty gruesome. And the worst is, even if we pretend, the other heroes somehow managed to get free so that the episode all in would play out. In the end, without Anne and the powers, no one can take on Andreas. He's in the castle with the core, beating up Sasha and Grime together. This route inevitably ends in total failure. I am sorry to inform you that the next route is not any different.
This is the worst!
But I promise it gets really good later on. Well, under the assumption that only the part of the powers that was inside of Anne perishes, the core will never ever get their hands on the entire prowess of the 3 Calamity Gems. Which is good, but let me phrase it differently. The core have 2.5 of 3 powers, and a basically fully functional Calamity box, while the heroes have nothing. Opposing the core with any chance of winning is no longer possible. Without fail, the heroes are going down, in accordance with one of the scenarios explained earlier. Regardless of the show not even getting so far, I think it is interesting to consider what influence the absence of Anne's power has on the secret spell. Like, if somehow the heroes got to the point that they had to stop the moon, would it work? Would the spell merely combine the remaining 2.5 powers? Would that suffice to destroy the moon? Or maybe the spell cannot be cast at all, because the powers aren't complete. That last question is connected to the next scenario. Right before her death, Anne suggested by killing her, the core might end up accidentally erasing all 3 gem powers. Does this even make sense? Yeah, of course. Apart from the fact that even the core, the arguably smartest being ever created inside of the Amphibia universe, arrived at the conclusion that this is a real possibility. The Calamity box clearly only works when all 3 powers are combined. In addition, the secret spell combines the powers, thereby unleashing their true potential, a power that is greater than the mere sum of the individual powers. These 2 aspects imply that the individual powers are parts of a whole. When one of its parts vanishes, the original whole obviously no longer exists. So in that case, as Anne draws her last breath, the gems and the box would instantly perish. In addition to all the Frobos immediately breaking down and the castle crashing into the ground, the greatest consequence is that the core won't go to Earth or any other world. Never. Luckily, due to the castle collapsing, the heroes get the chance to escape. At this point, the ending of this route has been determined as a happy ending, or a half-happy ending at least. Earth is not invaded, and the gems that have caused so much pain and suffering over the years are gone. Without the Frobos and their high-tech weapons, Andreas and the core are on their own. In other words, fighting them may be tough, but eventually the combined efforts of all amphibians will be enough to overthrow them. The monarchy is then replaced with a new government. Given that the box is gone for good, Sasha and Marcy are forced to stay in Amphibia forever. But as we already know, there are fates worse than that. In fact, they are offered high-ranking spots in the new government, as a token of gratitude for their services in the war. Sasha becomes one of the most important decision makers, next to Olivia, Yunan and Grime. Basically, this is all she ever wanted. However, owing to her character development, she uses her political power to do good and goes down in history as a righteous leader. Marcy, on the other hand, declines the top spot, instead becoming Mistress of Science or something along these lines. It's her who discovers the new continent and who will lead the expedition going there. All in all, this is quite the nice ending, excluding of course that Anne stays dead and there not being a copy of her. Alright, last but not least, I want to offer a fourth and the most dramatic alternative. Again, I need to emphasize, we don't really know how the calamity box and the gems work, how they relate to one another, how the powers relate to their vessels, the gems, and how they relate to people. Accordingly, I thought, what if the powers do not cease to exist when Anne dies, but they can't just return to the box either? As seen throughout the show, most of the time the powers actively needed to be moved between the girls and the box. Most notably, apparently, the only way to get the powers back into the box was by charging them in the temples. Otherwise, when the powers accidentally leak out of somewhere, for example out of the box during the original teleportation to Amphibia, or now out of Anne when she dies, they may seek the next closest available vessel. That is how the girls got the powers in the first place. In combination with the powers only entering those whose personality is in line with the gem's values, Anne's former power now flowing into Sprig makes a lot of sense. What's more, given he is emotionally shaken to the core due to Anne's death, his powers immediately awaken. He causes a huge commotion, and the heroes manage to escape the claws of the core for now, so that the show basically continues the way we know it, except that Sprig takes on Anne's part. He defeats Andreas on his own, using the red letter. Without it, he would have been a lost cause, given he's a lot less skilled in close combat than Anne. Then they all return to Amphibia, where the moon is about to crash into the planet. Well, originally, Mother Rome told only Anne about the secret spell, because it was obvious that she could handle this knowledge. Despite her not being here now, Mother Rome has to tell someone about the spell, considering it will likely be needed. She decides to inform Sasha and Sprig, because she already knows the two, in contrast to Marcy. I'd say the two have pretty much equal chances of sacrificing themselves, so we'll discuss both alternatives here. Sasha would do it because her development has been finalized at this point. There is no better chance for her to prove to the late Anne and the rest of the world that she has changed for the better. A selfless sacrifice is the perfect contrast to her past selfish behavior, though I feel she is not in the race for the position of Guardian, simply because her time in Amphibia proved she is too flawed to take on such an important task. Accordingly, Sasha's copy does not return, and without a set of shiny calamity shards, Marcy will never be able to return to Earth. Sprig wouldn't shy away from sacrificing himself either, because he loves Amphibia and wants to protect it. Additionally, he just knows Anne would have done the same. I guess he does have some chance of being appointed Guardian, taking into account that his development is quite similar to Anne's, though arguably he hasn't come quite as far as she has. Anyway, he may be brought back and the ending is practically the same as on the OT, just without Anne. By liking this video and subscribing to the channel, you can make sure you'll get more cartoon content uploaded directly to your feed.